Picture this. You're 3 days away from your 30th birthday celebration. 150 guests confirmed, a rooftop venue overlooking the city, the milestone you've been planning for months. But as you walk past your parents' study to grab your laptop charger, you hear voices that make your blood run cold. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. She'll be standing up there like the delusional failure she's always been, my mother hissed, her voice dripping with contempt. 150 people will finally see what we've always known. My brother Derek's laugh was pure venom. I've already prepared her precious speech notes. One small switch and she'll be reading about all her embarrassing failures instead of her so-called accomplishments. She'll humiliate herself in front of everyone who matters. They were planning to destroy me at my own birthday party, in front of everyone I cared about. For 30 years, I'd been the disappointment, the dreamer overshadowed by my successful corporate lawyer brother. They thought I was weak, forgettable, a struggling freelance writer who could barely pay rent. They had no idea who I really was. I just smiled, walked to my room, and made one phone call. Because what my family didn't know, what they were about to discover in the most spectacular way possible, is that their failure daughter had been hiding a secret that would change everything. By the end of this story, you'll witness the most satisfying birthday revenge ever executed. Derek's sabotage will backfire so magnificently that he'll become the laughingstock instead of me. My parents' cruelty will be exposed in front of 150 witnesses, and the shocking truth about who I really am will leave everyone's jaws on the floor. Trust me, karma has never been more beautiful than what you're about to see. My name is Natasha Reynolds. I'm 30 years old, and for the past 7 years, I've worked as what everyone believes is a struggling freelance writer, barely scraping by in a tiny studio apartment in Riverside District. To anyone looking at my life from the outside, I appeared to be exactly what my parents always said I was, impractical, unfocused, and quietly grateful for whatever small victories came my way. But appearances, as I was about to prove in the most spectacular fashion, can be devastatingly deceiving. It was exactly 3 days before my milestone 30th birthday party at the Azure Terrace, and I should have been floating on pure excitement. Instead, I sat in my childhood bedroom at my parents' estate in Willowbrook, my tablet balanced on my knees, scrolling through what looked like routine freelance job inquiries while my stomach churned with a familiar mixture of anticipation and dread. The anticipation came from knowing that in 3 days, I'd be celebrating a major milestone with friends who actually appreciated me. The dread, well, that came from being back in this house where I'd spent 30 years being reminded that I would never quite measure up. My phone buzzed with an incoming call, and I glanced at the screen before quickly declining it. The caller ID showed a number I recognized immediately, but answering it would have required explanations I wasn't ready to give. Not yet, anyway. Instead, I tucked the phone between my pillows and returned to my tablet where another message had just arrived in my supposedly routine freelance inbox. This one, like several others over the past few months, contained details about quarterly projections and expansion opportunities that would have seemed impossibly complex for a simple freelance writer to understand. I closed the tablet quickly as footsteps approached my door. Old habits die hard, and even at 30, I still found myself hiding things that might invite unwanted questions or worse, unwanted comparisons to my younger brother, Derek. "Natasha, dinner's ready," my mother called through the door, her voice carrying that particular tone of resigned duty she'd perfected over the years. It wasn't cruel, exactly, but it wasn't warm either. It was the voice of someone going through necessary motions. "Coming, Mom," I replied, sliding the tablet under my bed and checking my reflection in the dresser mirror. The woman looking back at me appeared perfectly ordinary, shoulder-length auburn hair, thrift store clothing, the kind of face that blended into coffee shop crowds. My parents had always made it clear that this ordinariness was both my defining characteristic and my greatest limitation. Downstairs, the dining room buzzed with the kind of energy that only appeared when Derek was home. My brother, at 27, had already made junior partner at Preston & Associates, one of the city's most prestigious law firms. His latest case victory had been featured in the Riverside Legal Journal, and he had a social circle that included city council members and business executives. Tonight, he held court at the dinner table, regaling our parents with stories from his latest courtroom triumph while they hung on every word. The opposing counsel actually tried to cite precedent from 1987, Derek was saying, his perfectly manicured hands gesturing expressively. I demolished his entire argument in under 5 minutes. The judge said it was the most decisive cross-examination he'd seen all year. That's wonderful, son, Dad beamed, his face radiating the kind of pride I'd seen countless times but never quite directed at me with the same intensity. I always knew you were destined for greatness. I took my seat quietly, hoping to avoid drawing attention to myself, but Derek's sharp eyes caught the movement. Oh, Natasha's here, he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. How's the writing career going? Still working on that novel you mentioned 5 years ago? I'm actually working on several projects, I replied evenly, though my cheeks warmed. They're going well. I'm sure they are, Derek said in a tone that suggested the opposite. Very brave of you to keep chasing that dream. Most people would have gotten a real job by now. Mom nodded approvingly at Derek's observation. Well, at least Natasha is persistent. That's something, I suppose. Not everyone can be successful like your brother, but she tries in her own way. The words stung as they were meant to, but I'd learned long ago not to show the hurt. Instead, I focused on my plate and tried to remember that in 3 days, I would be celebrating my birthday with people who actually valued me, and I could finally stop caring what my family thought of my choices. The conversation drifted back to Derek's career achievements, and I let my mind wander to the memory of my college graduation 6 years ago. I'd finished magna cum laude with a degree in creative writing and business, but the day had passed virtually unnoticed in our household. Derek had closed his first major case that same week, and my parents had thrown an impromptu celebration dinner, inviting extended family and friends to toast his emerging talent. My graduation announcement had been relegated to a brief mention over breakfast, sandwiched between discussions of Derek's career prospects and weekend plans. After dinner, I retreated to my room and pulled out the sleek platinum smartwatch that my business partner, Jasmine, had given me last month. To anyone else, it would appear to be simply an elegant accessory, but I knew better. The watch face displayed notifications from my actual professional life, the one my family knew nothing about. Jasmine had presented it with a knowing smile and a gentle squeeze of my shoulder. She'd never said the words out loud, but that watch was her way of telling me that she saw who I really was, even when I couldn't reveal it to anyone else. Even when my own family couldn't see past their preconceptions to notice that their ordinary daughter might be hiding something extraordinary. I was checking the latest metrics from my publishing platform, smiling at the thought of Jasmine's quiet confidence in me, when I heard voices drifting up from my father's study below. My parents were still awake, probably having their evening coffee and discussing tomorrow's party preparations. I was about to put in my earbuds and return to reviewing my business analytics when I caught my name in their conversation. Something in my mother's tone made me freeze. I set down my tablet and moved closer to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. We'll humiliate her in front of 150 guests. The words hit me like ice water. And suddenly, everything changed. In that moment, I realized that the birthday celebration I'd been planning for months, the milestone I'd dreamed of since I was a little girl, was about to become the stage for something far more sinister than I'd ever imagined. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain they could hear it downstairs. But I pressed my ear harder against the door, straining to catch every word of what was quickly becoming the most devastating conversation of my life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The speech swap is perfect, my mother's voice carried a satisfaction I'd never heard directed toward anything involving me. I found all those old rejection letters from publishers. Remember when she sent that terrible manuscript to 30 different agents and got rejected by every single one? And that embarrassing article she wrote for the community blog that had so many errors they had to take it down? My father's chuckle was low and cruel. The video montage will set it up perfectly. I've been working on it all week. It starts with those clips from her high school drama performances where she forgot her lines, then moves to her failed attempts at various jobs, and finally that cringe-worthy poetry reading at the bookstore where people actually walked out. I felt sick. Every humiliating moment from my past, every awkward phase, every small failure I'd thought my parents had forgotten or forgiven, was apparently being compiled into some sort of public execution disguised as a birthday tribute. The memories they were discussing flashed through my mind with painful clarity. The manuscript I'd written at 22, full of youthful enthusiasm but objectively terrible prose. The community blog article where I'd confused there and at there multiple times because I'd been rushing to meet a deadline. The poetry reading where my experimental verse had been too avant-garde for the conservative literary crowd. But the real masterpiece, my mother continued with obvious glee, is Derek's contribution. Tell her what you've arranged, sweetheart. Derek's voice joined the conversation, and I could practically hear his smile through the floor. Oh, it's going to be absolutely perfect, Mom. Remember how Natasha's been working on her acceptance speech for weeks? She thinks she's going to thank everyone for supporting her writing career and talk about her dreams coming true. What did you do? Dad asked, though his tone suggested he already knew he'd be pleased with the answer. I broke into her laptop last week when she was in the shower, Derek said, his voice dripping with malicious satisfaction. I found her speech document and created an identical file with the same name. But my version? It's a detailed confession of all her failures, lies about her success, and embarrassing personal moments. I even included that time she got drunk at Cousin Rita's wedding and cried about being alone forever. The room spun around me. My carefully crafted speech, the one where I'd planned to subtly hint at my real accomplishments without revealing everything, had been replaced with a humiliation script designed to destroy any credibility I had left. So when she gets up there to give her speech, Derek continued, she'll open the file on the venue's presentation screen, and instead of her prepared remarks, the entire room will see a confession of failure. By the time she realizes what's happening, everyone will have read about how she's been lying about her career, exaggerating her accomplishments, and pretending to be more successful than she really is. The timing has to be perfect, my mother added. Right when she's feeling confident and happy, standing in front of all her friends and our business associates. That's when she needs to be brought back down to earth. Don't worry, Derek laughed. I've tested it 3 times. The moment she clicks on that file, her entire fake persona will collapse. Everyone will see exactly what kind of person Natasha really is underneath all her pretenses about being a creative professional. My phone buzzed against my pillow, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Grabbing it quickly to silence it, I saw an encrypted message notification on my screen. My heart was still racing from the conversation below, but professional instinct made me open the message despite my emotional state. NR, urgent update needed on the Crimson Publishing acquisition. Final contracts require your signature by Friday. The board is ready to close the deal, but needs your approval on the adjusted terms. This could be the biggest expansion yet. 8 figures confirmed. I stared at the message, my mind struggling to shift gears from the horror of my family's betrayal to the complex business deal that required my immediate attention. Another message appeared almost instantly. Additionally, the Toronto partnership proposal has been approved by their board. They want to meet next week to finalize the collaboration agreement. The revenue projections we discussed are all confirmed. This is moving faster than we anticipated. A third message followed seconds later, this one marked with the highest encryption level my company used for only the most sensitive communications. Natasha, the international partners are pushing for the announcement. They believe the timing is perfect with the market conditions. Are you ready to go public with the merger? The valuation numbers exceed our projections. We're looking at transforming the entire independent publishing landscape. I quickly typed back a response, my fingers shaking slightly as I tried to focus on business while my family plotted my destruction just one floor below. Hold all major announcements until after this weekend. Maintain current discretion protocols. We'll review all contracts and proposals Monday. Proceed with standard due diligence, but no signatures without my direct approval. Just as I hit send, Derek's voice drifted up from below again, and I realized I'd missed part of their conversation while dealing with the business messages. Said he'd make sure the photographer captures everything, he was saying. Trevor owes me a favor from law school, and he's excited about documenting what he calls the fall of the pretentious artist. He'll get every angle of her humiliation. Trevor. I recognized the name as Derek's former roommate who now ran a photography business that specialized in high society events. My brother had apparently recruited someone from outside the family to help orchestrate my humiliation, someone with professional skills who could ensure the most embarrassing moment of my life was perfectly documented for posterity. It's about time Natasha learned that just because she managed to convince some people to attend her party doesn't mean she's suddenly special, my father added. She's always been the weak link in this family, and it's time everyone saw that. The best part, Derek continued, is that she'll have no idea what's coming. She'll be standing up there, probably feeling proud and confident for once in her pathetic life, and then reality will come crashing down. Literally. My phone buzzed again with another encrypted message, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. The contrast between my secret professional life and my family's perception of me had never felt more surreal. Here I was, receiving urgent communications about million-dollar deals and international business partnerships, while my own family plotted to strip away my dignity in the most literal sense possible. The speech file will display on the big screen. Derek's voice grew colder and more calculating as he continued. Right when everyone's watching her tribute, right when she thinks she's the center of attention for all the right reasons, she'll become the laughingstock she's always been meant to be. I heard chairs scraping against the floor as they began to move around downstairs, and I quickly backed away from my door. My entire body was trembling, not just from fear, but from a rage so pure and focused that it surprised me with its intensity. My own family wasn't just planning to embarrass me at my birthday party. They were planning to destroy me, to strip away every shred of dignity I had in front of everyone who mattered to me, to ensure that the carefully constructed image I'd maintained for years would be shattered beyond repair. But as I sat there in the darkness of my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of a girl who had always been told she wasn't enough, something shifted inside me. Derek's final words echoed in my mind, but instead of despair, I felt a cold, calculating fury that matched my brother's own tone. Her speech will collapse at the perfect moment, Derek sneered coldly. Right when everyone's watching her presentation. She'll humiliate herself completely. Something extraordinary happened in the silence that followed Derek's cruel declaration. Instead of the tears I might have expected, instead of the panic that would have consumed the old Natasha, I felt a peculiar sense of calm settle over me like a familiar coat. I sat back on my heels away from the door and found myself smiling in the darkness of my childhood room. It was the same smile I wore during high-stakes publishing negotiations, the one that appeared when an opponent showed their hand too early and revealed exactly how I could defeat them. My family had just made the critical error that every successful entrepreneur learns to watch for. They had underestimated their competition. The voices downstairs continued their planning, but I no longer needed to listen. I had heard enough to understand the full scope of their scheme, and more importantly, I now understood exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. This wasn't just sibling rivalry or parental disappointment. This was a calculated attempt to destroy me at the most important moment of my life, and they expected me to stand there helplessly while it happened. They had no idea who they were actually fighting. I moved away from the door and settled cross-legged on my bed, pulling my tablet back out from underneath it. My fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, accessing a contact list that existed in a completely separate world from my life in this house. As I scrolled through names, I thought about how many years I had spent in this very room, believing that my family's assessment of my worth was accurate. How many nights I had lain here wondering why I couldn't be more like Derek, why I couldn't make my parents proud, why I always seemed to fall short of their expectations. The memory that surfaced was from 4 years ago, during one of the last family dinners I had attended before I stopped trying to share my professional victories with them. I had been excited, bursting with news that I couldn't wait to share. My digital publishing platform had just secured its first major author contract, a deal that had taken months of careful negotiation and had finally validated everything I had been working toward. I have some exciting news, I had announced during a lull in Derek's latest courtroom stories. My publishing company just secured a partnership with best-selling author Cameron Mitchell. It's a 6-figure contract, and he wants to launch his entire backlist exclusively through our platform. The silence that followed was deafening. My father had looked at me with the kind of pitying expression usually reserved for children who claimed they could fly. My mother had actually laughed, a sound that still echoed painfully in my memory. "Oh, Natasha, she had said, shaking her head. You and your little fantasies. A 6-figure contract? Really? Don't you think it's time to focus on realistic goals? Maybe get a job at a real publishing house as an assistant? Derek had been the one to deliver the final blow. It's sweet that you're trying so hard to compete with me, but maybe you should stick to what you're actually good at. Writing blog posts about coffee shops, right? They had all laughed then, and I had felt myself shrinking back into the familiar role of the family disappointment. But tonight, as I remembered that moment, I felt something entirely different. They hadn't been laughing at my failure. They had been laughing at a success they were too blind to recognize. And that changed everything. I found the contact I was looking for and checked the time. It was nearly 10 p.m., but Jasmine Park kept notoriously late hours, especially during busy season. Jasmine was more than just my business partner and best friend. She was a former event coordinator who had transformed corporate launches for some of the biggest tech companies on the West Coast. More importantly, she was someone who understood exactly what I was capable of because she had worked with me directly on 3 major author launch events over the past 2 years. The phone rang twice before her familiar voice answered, warm despite the late hour. Natasha, I was wondering when you'd call. Please tell me you're not canceling our planning session for the presentation system. Jasmine, I need your help with something much more important than technical setup, I said, and something in my tone must have alerted her to the seriousness of the situation because her voice immediately shifted to match my intensity. What's wrong? I gave her the condensed version, explaining about the sabotage, the switched speech files, and the hidden humiliation plan that was designed to destroy me in front of 150 guests. As I spoke, I could hear her intake of breath and the sound of her moving around what I knew was her home office. Those absolute monsters, she breathed when I finished. Natasha, I am so sorry. But also, I have to say, they have no idea who they're messing with, do they? No, they don't, I agreed. And for the first time all evening, I felt genuinely happy. Can you help me turn this around? Darling, can I help you turn this around? Jasmine's laugh was pure mischief. I've been designing transformation reveals for Fortune 500 product launches for 10 years. What your brother thinks he's arranged is child's play compared to what we're going to create. By the time I'm finished, that file he's planning to display will trigger the most spectacular presentation anyone at that party has ever seen. We spent the next 30 minutes discussing logistics, timing, and the specific modifications we would need to make. Jasmine's excitement was infectious, and I found myself genuinely looking forward to my birthday party for the first time since overhearing my family's conversation. The key, she explained, is that everything has to look completely normal until the moment of truth. Your brother will trigger his sabotage file expecting your humiliation, but instead, he'll launch a carefully designed presentation that will leave every single guest speechless. How quickly can we make this happen? I asked. I'll access your cloud storage tonight and have the counterfile ready by tomorrow evening, Jasmine promised. Natasha, trust me when I say that by the time we're finished, your brother won't just fail to humiliate you. He's going to accidentally give you the most spectacular birthday moment anyone has ever seen. As I hung up the phone, I realized that my hands were completely steady. The panic, the fear, even the anger had transformed into something much more powerful, absolute certainty. I thought about all the years I had spent letting my family's opinions dictate how I felt about myself. All the times I had apologized for taking up space or asking for recognition. Those days were over. I thought about the publishing empire I had been building in secret, about the respect I commanded in author circles across the country, about the million-dollar deals that crossed my desk every week. I thought about Jasmine, who saw my worth even when I struggled to see it myself. And I thought about the 150 guests who would be attending my birthday party, most of whom had no idea that the woman they'd be celebrating was someone very different from the person my family had always claimed I was. Derek thought he was going to expose me as a fraud in front of everyone who mattered. What he was actually going to do was provide me with the perfect opportunity to reveal exactly who I had become. After making the call, I just smiled and whispered, "Let's see who becomes the laughingstock." The satisfaction of my whispered declaration was still warming me when I heard a soft knock on my bedroom door. Not the sharp, impatient rap my parents used, or Derek's entitled pounding, but the gentle tap that could only belong to one person in this house. "Come in, Aunt Lorraine," I called quietly, closing my tablet and setting it aside as the door opened to reveal the one family member who had never made me feel like I needed to apologize for existing. At 65, my aunt moved with the careful grace of someone who had weathered decades of family storms and emerged stronger for it. Her silver hair was pulled back in its characteristic elegant bun, and even in her casual evening clothes, she carried herself with a dignity that my mother had always envied but never managed to emulate. "I thought I heard your voice on the phone," she said, settling herself on the edge of my bed with the familiarity of someone who had been offering comfort in this room for 30 years. "And before that, I heard voices downstairs that made my blood boil." I looked at her sharply. "You heard them?" "These old walls aren't as thick as your parents think they are," Aunt Lorraine said grimly. "I heard enough to understand what they're planning for your birthday party, and I want you to know that I am absolutely disgusted by their behavior." The relief that washed over me was so intense it nearly brought tears to my eyes. For a moment, I had feared that even my aunt might side with the rest of the family, that I truly was alone in this house full of people who were supposed to love me. "I don't understand why they hate me so much," I whispered, voicing the fear that had haunted me since childhood. Aunt Lorraine reached over and took my hands in hers, her grip warm and surprisingly strong. "Oh, sweetheart, they don't hate you. That's what makes this so much worse. They're afraid of you, and they always have been." "Afraid of me?" I couldn't hide my disbelief. "Aunt Lorraine, I'm the family disappointment. I'm the one who never measures up to Derek, who works as a struggling writer while he conquers the legal world. What could they possibly fear?" My aunt's laugh was soft but held an edge of something that might have been pride. "Natasha, dear, you've built an entire empire right under their noses, and I've been watching you do it. All those late nights when you thought everyone was asleep. All those phone calls you take in the garden because you think no one notices. I've seen you working at that kitchen table at 3 o'clock in the morning with contracts and manuscripts spread out like you're running a war room." My heart stopped. "You know, I've known for over 2 years that you're far more than you let this family believe," she said gently. "I may be old, but I'm not blind. I've watched you transform from a girl who let her parents diminish her into a woman who commands respect from people they could never even dream of impressing." The validation I felt in that moment was overwhelming. Someone had been seeing me, truly seeing me, even when I thought I was completely invisible. "But why didn't you ever say anything?" I asked. "Because you weren't ready," Aunt Lorraine replied simply. "You needed to find your own strength first, and you needed to decide for yourself when you were ready to stop hiding who you've become. Tonight, listening to their vicious plans, I realized that moment has arrived." She paused, studying my face with the keen intelligence that had always made her the wisest person I knew. "Tell me what you're planning to do about this situation." I found myself sharing everything with her. Jasmine's plan, the presentation transformation, my certainty that I could turn their sabotage into my triumph. As I spoke, I watched my aunt's expression shift from concern to approval to something that looked distinctly like anticipation. "Your truth and talent will triumph," she said when I finished, and the certainty in her voice made my spine straighten with new confidence. "They've underestimated you for the last time, and they're about to learn exactly what that mistake costs. Will you help me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the fire in her eyes. "Natasha, I would be honored to help you," she said firmly. "More than that, I want you to give me copies of everything, the recordings, any evidence you gather, all of it. I'll store it safely, and if they try to claim later that any of this was your imagination or your vindictiveness, they'll have to explain it to me first." The idea of my formidable aunt confronting my parents with evidence of their conspiracy was almost as satisfying as imagining their faces when their sabotage backfired. "There's something else you should know," Aunt Lorraine continued, her voice dropping to a more serious tone. "This isn't the first time your mother has tried to destroy someone she felt threatened by. When she was younger, before she married your father, she sabotaged her own best friend's scholarship application because she couldn't stand that someone else was more academically successful than she was." "What do you mean?" I asked, though something in her tone made me suspect I wasn't going to like the answer. Your mother forged recommendation letters that made her friend look unstable and unreliable, Aunt Lorraine said quietly. She destroyed that girl's chance at a full scholarship to Princeton, all because she couldn't stand that someone else was happier and more successful than she was. The girl never recovered professionally. She ended up dropping out of community college. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My mother, who had spent my entire life lecturing me about honesty and character, had destroyed another woman's future out of pure spite. "Why are you telling me this?" I whispered. "Because you need to understand that what they're planning to do to you isn't just cruel. It's part of a pattern," Aunt Lorraine said, her voice steady but her eyes sad. "Your mother has spent her whole life tearing down anyone who threatens her sense of superiority. She did it to her best friend, and now she's doing it to her own daughter. But Natasha, there are deeper secrets in this family, things that go back years. And if they push you too far, those secrets will come to light." I stared at her, trying to process the implications of what she was telling me. "What other secrets?" "Let's hope we don't have to find out," she said cryptically. "But if they want to play these kinds of games with you, they should remember that they're not the only ones with ammunition." My aunt stood up then, smoothing down her blouse with the same dignity she brought to everything she did. She bent down and kissed my forehead, a gesture that reminded me of every night she had tucked me in as a child, every time she had made me feel safe and loved in a house where those feelings were rare. "Get some sleep, sweetheart," she said. "You're going to need your strength for what's coming. But remember, you're not fighting this battle alone anymore." As she moved toward the door, she paused and turned back to me. In the dim light from my bedside lamp, her face looked suddenly younger, as if the prospect of the coming confrontation had awakened something fierce and protective that had been sleeping for years. "They fear you because they know you're more powerful than them," Aunt Lorraine whispered. "But they don't know how powerful." After my aunt left, I sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything she had revealed. The pattern of my mother's behavior, the family secrets that lurked beneath the surface, the confirmation that someone had been watching and believing in me all along. But I couldn't afford to let emotion cloud my strategic thinking. I needed to assemble a team that could match my family's conspiracy with superior planning and execution. I opened my tablet and began making a list of the people I would need to contact. Each person represented a specific skill set that would be crucial to turning Derek's sabotage into my vindication. My first call after Jasmine had to be to my business attorney, Patricia Thornburg. Patricia had handled all the legal complexities of building my publishing platform, from copyright issues to contract negotiations. More importantly, she understood that documentation and evidence were the foundations of any successful defense. Patricia answered on the third ring, her voice alert despite the late hour. "Natasha? Is everything all right with the Toronto deal?" "Patricia, the business is fine. But I have a personal situation that requires your particular expertise," I said, then launched into an explanation of my family's conspiracy and the need for comprehensive documentation of everything that was about to unfold. "What your family is planning isn't just cruel, it's potentially actionable," Patricia said after I finished. "Defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, possibly even fraud if they've been making false claims about you to others. I'll prepare a full evidence packet and be present at the party to document everything. If they follow through with this plan, they'll be handing us a lawsuit on a silver platter." Next, I contacted Raymond Shin, a tech specialist who had helped me build the back-end infrastructure for my publishing platform. Raymond was a genius with presentation systems and had once told me he could make PowerPoint dance the tango. "Raymond, I need you to create a presentation that will blow people's minds," I said. "But it has to be triggered by someone else's attempt at sabotage." "Oh, this sounds fun," Raymond replied, his enthusiasm immediate. "What are we talking about? A Trojan horse presentation? Something that looks like one thing but transforms into something else?" I explained Derek's plan to switch my speech file, and Raymond's excited response told me I'd called the right person. "Natasha, I can create a presentation that will not only counter his sabotage but make it look like the most spectacular planned reveal in event history," he said. "We'll use his trigger file as a gateway. The moment it's opened, it'll launch a multimedia experience that will make every TED Talk look like amateur hour. Your real accomplishments, your company's success, testimonials from authors you've helped, all of it presented with the production value of a major product launch. The pieces were falling into place. Jasmine would handle the event coordination and ensure every technical element worked flawlessly. Patricia would document everything for legal purposes. Raymond would transform Derek's weapon into my triumph. But I needed one more ally, someone who could provide real-time intelligence about what my family was planning in those final hours before the party. I scrolled through my contacts and found the name I was looking for, Kevin Martinez, a private investigator I'd used 6 months ago to verify the credentials of a potential business partner. Kevin was discreet, thorough, and had a talent for gathering information without being detected. "Kevin, I need surveillance on 3 people for the next 72 hours, I said when he answered. "My parents and my brother. I need to know every meeting they have, every phone call they make, and every step of their conspiracy as it unfolds." "Family situation?" Kevin asked, his tone neutral and professional. "The worst kind," I replied. "They're planning to destroy me publicly, and I need to stay one step ahead of any modifications they make to their plan." "Consider it done," Kevin said. "I'll have eyes on all 3 of them by morning. You'll receive hourly reports on all their activities." As I ended the call, I felt the familiar surge of confidence that came from assembling a team of competent professionals who understood both the stakes and the strategy. This was the world where I belonged, where my judgment was trusted and my leadership was respected. My family's conspiracy had accidentally reminded me of my own power by forcing me to deploy it. I spent the next hour coordinating with my team, refining every detail of our counter-strategy. Raymond sent me preliminary mock-ups of the presentation design, and even in rough form, it was breathtaking. He had structured it like a documentary reveal, starting with subtle hints about my real career before building to a crescendo that would leave no doubt about my accomplishments. "The key is pacing," Raymond explained during our video call. "When Derek triggers his fake file, there'll be a 3-second pause, just long enough for him to think it's working. Then the screen will go black, and we'll launch with a single question in bold white text: 'Who is Natasha Reynolds?' From there, it's a journey that answers that question in ways your family never imagined." As we finalized the technical details, my phone buzzed with the first report from Kevin. He'd already positioned surveillance near my parents' estate and had intercepted several concerning communications. "Your brother made 3 calls in the past hour," Kevin's message read. First to the venue manager at Azure Terrace, confirming special technical requirements for the birthday tribute. Second to someone named Trevor Blackstone, a photographer, discussing optimal angles for capturing authentic reactions. Third to your father, with repeated mentions of the package being ready for deployment. The methodical nature of their conspiracy was almost impressive in its thoroughness. They weren't just planning a single moment of humiliation, they were orchestrating an entire evening designed to systematically destroy my credibility. But Kevin's next message contained information that shifted my strategy entirely. "Most interesting development: your mother met with someone at Riverside Country Club this evening. Facial recognition identifies her as Barbara Stevenson, editor of the Riverside Social Register." Their conversation lasted 47 minutes. Audio surveillance caught phrases like "exclusive story," "daughter's deception," and "appropriate consequences for fraud." "Your mother appears to be arranging for your alleged failures to be published in the city's most prominent society magazine." I felt cold dread wash over me. This wasn't just about humiliating me at my birthday party. My mother was planning to ensure that the damage extended far beyond one evening, using her social connections to plant stories that would follow me professionally for years. The Riverside Social Register wasn't just a gossip column, it was required reading for everyone in the city's business and cultural circles. A hit piece in that publication could genuinely damage my professional relationships, especially with authors and partners who didn't know about my real accomplishments. I immediately called Patricia back. "We have a bigger problem. My mother's trying to plant a defamatory story in the Riverside Social Register. Can we stop it?" "Not before the party," Patricia said grimly. "But we can prepare a response. If they publish anything false or defamatory, we'll have grounds for a lawsuit that could bankrupt them. More importantly, we can prepare our own story, the truth about your company, and offer it to legitimate business publications. When your real credentials come out, their lies will be exposed automatically. The suggestion triggered an idea that had been forming since I first overheard my family's conspiracy. What if I didn't just defend myself at the party? What if I used their attack as the launching point for finally revealing my true professional identity to the world? For 7 years, I had hidden my success to avoid exactly this kind of family drama. But their conspiracy had created a situation where hiding was no longer possible or desirable. They were going to force a revelation anyway. I might as well control the narrative. Patricia, let's be proactive, I said, my mind racing with possibilities. Contact the Riverside Business Journal and offer them an exclusive interview about my company. But embargo the story until the day after my party. That way, when my family's lies are exposed at the event, there'll be immediate authoritative confirmation of the truth in print. I love it, Patricia replied. A preemptive strike that becomes a validation mechanism. I'll reach out to their editor tonight. As I continued coordinating with my team, another message arrived from Kevin, this one marked urgent. Derek just received a large package delivery. Security camera footage shows it's labeled presentation materials, handle with care. He carried it directly to his car. Recommend we determine contents before party. I forwarded the message to Raymond, who responded within minutes. If he's got physical presentation materials, he might be planning a backup in case the digital sabotage fails. Could be printed photos, documents, or props. We should prepare contingencies for multiple attack vectors. The realization that my family had backup plans forced me to think even more comprehensively about my counter-strategy. I couldn't just neutralize Derek's digital file. I needed to be ready for anything they might deploy during the party. I called Jasmine back, explaining the new complications. Natasha, here's what we do, she said, her voice carrying the calm confidence of someone who had managed crisis situations at high-profile events. We station our own people throughout the venue. I'll bring my full event team, 6 people who can respond instantly to any surprise moves your family makes. If Derek tries to distribute physical materials, we intercept them. If your parents try to make unscheduled announcements, we control the microphone system. We turn Azure Terrace into our territory, not theirs. The strategic planning continued past midnight, with each member of my team contributing expertise that transformed my defensive posture into something more powerful. A comprehensive operation that would not only neutralize my family's attacks but demonstrate capabilities they never knew I possessed. Raymond created multiple backup versions of the presentation, each triggered by different potential sabotage attempts. Jasmine mapped out the entire venue and assigned her team members to strategic positions. Patricia prepared legal documentation that could be deployed instantly if my family's conspiracy crossed into actionable territory. Kevin continued his surveillance, providing real-time intelligence about every move my family made. By 2 a.m., I had transformed from a herd daughter into a CEO managing a complex operation with military precision. The emotional pain of my family's betrayal was still there, but it had been channeled into cold, focused determination. My tablet chimed with a new message from Jasmine, everything's in place. Your family thinks they're orchestrating your downfall, but what they're actually doing is providing you with the perfect stage for your debut. By this time Saturday night, Natasha Reynolds won't be hiding anymore. I looked around my childhood bedroom, at the walls that had witnessed so many years of self-doubt and diminished dreams. In 72 hours, I would walk out of this house for the last time as the person my family thought they knew. The woman who returned would be someone entirely different, not because I had changed, but because I would finally stop pretending to be less than I was. My phone buzzed one final time before I forced myself to try sleeping. It was a message from Aunt Lorraine, sent from her room down the hall. I'm proud of you, Natasha. Not for what you're about to do to them, but for what you've already built despite them. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we prepare for war. I smiled in the darkness, feeling more supported and validated than I had in years. My family had accidentally given me the greatest gift possible. They had forced me to stop hiding and start fighting. And they had no idea that in trying to destroy the daughter they thought was weak, they had awakened someone far more formidable than they could imagine. The morning of my 30th birthday arrived with deceptive serenity. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, and for a brief moment before full consciousness returned, I felt the innocent excitement that birthdays are supposed to bring. Then reality crashed back. Tonight, my family would attempt to destroy me in front of 150 people. But I wasn't the frightened daughter they expected. I was a CEO who had spent 72 hours preparing for battle. My phone was already buzzing with coordinated messages from my team. Jasmine had arrived at Azure Terrace at dawn to oversee setup, ensuring that every technical system was under our control before the venue staff even arrived. Raymond had uploaded the final version of our counter-presentation to 3 separate backup servers. Patricia had confirmed that the Riverside Business Journal interview was scheduled for tomorrow morning, ready to validate everything I was about to reveal. Kevin's overnight surveillance report contained the most crucial intelligence. Derek made final preparations at 3 a.m. Loaded additional materials into his vehicle, including what appears to be a large poster board and a box marked photo prints. Your parents held a strategy session in the study until 2:30 a.m., going over timing sequences and transition cues. They're treating this like a military operation. Good, I thought. So am I. I spent the morning at my apartment across town, away from my family's watchful eyes. My team assembled there for final coordination, transforming my living room into a command center that would have impressed any corporate war room. Jasmine spread venue blueprints across my coffee table, marking positions for her 6-person event team with military precision. Taylor will control the main audio system from the sound booth. Marcus has the lighting board. Alexis will monitor the entrance for any surprise guests your family might have invited. Chen and Rodriguez will circulate as regular guests, but they're really our rapid response team if your family tries anything physical. And I'll be backstage with direct access to all presentation systems. What about the photographer they hired? I asked. Trevor Blackstone. Already handled, Jasmine smiled. I contacted him yesterday, explained that I'm the event coordinator, and informed him that all photography at the venue must be coordinated through my office due to insurance requirements. He has no idea we know about his arrangement with Derek. He'll be shooting tonight, but every photo he takes will be reviewed by our team before he can share anything. And we'll have our own photographer documenting everything. Patricia reviewed the legal framework she'd established. I'll be recording everything on 3 separate devices as backup documentation. If your family's attacks cross into defamation or harassment, we'll have grounds for immediate legal action. I've also prepared a cease and desist letter ready to be served tonight if they attempt to publish or distribute any false information about you. Raymond pulled up his laptop, showing me the final presentation sequence. The moment Derek opens his sabotaged speech file, there'll be a 3-second black screen. Then white text appears, the truth about Natasha Reynolds. From there, it's a 12-minute journey through your actual accomplishments, structured like a documentary revelation. He walked me through each segment. The presentation would start with testimonials from authors I'd helped publish, New York Times bestsellers and award winners whose names would be recognized by everyone at the party. Then it would reveal revenue figures from my publishing platform, showing 7-figure annual earnings. Next came the expansion plans, including the Toronto partnership that would position my company as a major player in digital publishing. Finally, it would conclude with the announcement of my upcoming profile in the Riverside Business Journal, lending mainstream media credibility to everything the audience had just witnessed. The production value is crucial, Raymond explained. This needs to look so professional, so thoroughly documented, that no one can dismiss it as fabricated or exaggerated. By the end, your family won't just look cruel, they'll look delusional for ever thinking you were a failure. As afternoon approached, Aunt Lorraine arrived at my apartment with a garment bag that immediately caught my attention. You'll need to look the part tonight, she said, unzipping the bag to reveal a stunning dress that took my breath away. It was a deep emerald green with elegant lines that were simultaneously sophisticated and bold, nothing like the modest, forgettable clothing I usually wore around my family. Aunt Lorraine, this is beautiful, but won't it seem odd that I'm suddenly dressing so differently? Darling, everything about tonight is going to be different, she replied with a knowing smile. Besides, it's your 30th birthday. You're entitled to make a statement. And when your real identity is revealed, this dress will make perfect sense. You'll look like the successful CEO you actually are, not the struggling writer they think you are. The dress fit perfectly, transforming my appearance in ways that went beyond mere clothing. Looking at myself in the mirror, I saw someone who belonged in boardrooms and publishing house offices, someone who commanded respect rather than pity. My team spent the remaining hours conducting final rehearsals, running through every possible scenario my family might deploy. We practiced responses to Derek's digital sabotage, my parents' potential verbal attacks, and even the physical props Kevin's surveillance had detected. What if they try to speak before you do? Jasmine asked, role-playing potential disruptions. Then Taylor cuts their microphone and we control when sound is restored, I replied, thinking through the scenario. Our narrative controls the evening, not theirs. At 5 p.m., Kevin sent his final pre-party surveillance report. All 3 targets are currently at the venue. Derek arrived early and was observed accessing the presentation computer, presumably uploading his sabotaged file. Your parents are coordinating with someone identified as Barbara Stevenson from the social register. Recommend extreme caution. They may be planning to have a reporter present to document your supposed humiliation. The revelation that they'd invited a society reporter to witness my destruction added a new dimension to tonight's stakes. But it also meant that when their plan backfired, the truth about my success would reach an even wider audience. Perfect, Patricia said when I shared the update. If Stevenson is there, she'll witness firsthand that everything your mother told her was a lie. The social register will have to print a retraction, and we'll have grounds for a defamation suit that could be quite costly for your parents. As we prepared to leave for the venue, I gathered my team for a final briefing. I want to be clear about something, I said, looking at each person who had dedicated their time and expertise to helping me. Tonight isn't about revenge. It's about truth. My family chose to wage war against reality itself. They decided that their perception of who I should be was more important than who I actually am. What we're doing tonight is simply revealing facts they've refused to acknowledge. Jasmine squeezed my hand. We know, Natasha. That's why we're all here. You've built something remarkable, and you deserve to stop hiding it. The drive to Azure Terrace felt surreal. The venue was spectacular, a rooftop space with panoramic views of the city, elegant lighting, and a sophisticated atmosphere that perfectly matched the professional image I was about to reveal. My family had unknowingly chosen the ideal setting for my transformation from their perceived failure to acknowledged success. As I stepped out of the car, I could see guests already arriving. Friends from my actual life, authors, publishing professionals, business contacts who knew my real accomplishments. But there were also people from my family's world, my parents' country club friends, Derek's legal colleagues, community members who had only ever known me as the disappointing daughter. Tonight, these 2 worlds would collide, and only one version of Natasha Reynolds would survive. Jasmine's team was already in position when I entered the venue. I spotted Taylor in the sound booth, headset on, looking like any professional audio technician. Marcus had the lighting controls, subtly adjusting the ambience to create the perfect dramatic atmosphere for what was coming. Alexis stood near the entrance with a tablet, appearing to check the guest list but actually monitoring for any unexpected arrivals. The venue was filling rapidly. I recognized Cameron Mitchell, the best-selling author whose career-defining contract with my platform had launched us into the major leagues. He caught my eye and raised his glass in a subtle salute, one of the few people present who knew exactly who I was. Nearby stood Helena Voss, whose memoir I'd published last year had spent 6 weeks on the bestseller lists. She was deep in conversation with another of my authors, both of them aware that tonight would be significant but not knowing exactly how. Then there were my family's guests, the country club set, Derek's pompous legal partners, my parents' social circle. They wore expressions of polite obligation, people attending a birthday party for someone they considered insignificant but whose parents they needed to stay friendly with for business or social reasons. And there, in the corner, I spotted Barbara Stevenson from the Riverside Social Register, notebook in hand, clearly positioned to document what my mother had promised would be a scandalous revelation of my fraudulent life. My parents approached with practiced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Natasha, darling, you look different," my mother said, her gaze sweeping over my emerald dress with barely concealed disapproval. "Quite bold for someone in your financial position." I hope you didn't spend money you don't have on that. Happy birthday, sweetheart, my father added, his tone carrying the patronizing warmth he'd perfected over 3 decades. 30 years old. Quite a milestone. I'm sure tonight will be very memorable for you. The double meaning in his words wasn't subtle, but I simply smiled. I'm certain it will be, Dad. For all of us. Derek materialized beside them, his confidence radiating as he surveyed the gathering crowd. Great turnout, sis. I made sure to invite some of my colleagues from the firm. Thought you could use some connections with successful people. He paused meaningfully. You know, for networking purposes. Never too late to find a real career. That's very thoughtful, Derek, I replied calmly, watching his eyes flicker with satisfaction at what he perceived as my usual passive acceptance of his condescension. I'm sure your colleagues will find tonight very educational. The evening progressed through dinner service, with my family playing their roles perfectly. They were attentive hosts, making sure to circulate among guests, building anticipation for the birthday tribute they'd promised. I watched Derek make several trips to the presentation booth, supposedly checking technical details, but actually confirming his sabotaged file was in place. What he didn't know was that Raymond had remote access to the entire system and was tracking every move Derek made. Each time my brother touched the computer, Raymond documented it with screen recordings that would later prove the deliberate nature of his sabotage. As dessert was served, my father stood and clinked his glass for attention. The room quieted, and I felt 150 pairs of eyes turn toward the head table where my family had positioned themselves like judges preparing to deliver a verdict. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us to celebrate Natasha's 30th birthday, my father began, his voice carrying the authority of a successful real estate developer accustomed to commanding rooms. As her father, I wanted to take a few minutes to share some thoughts about the journey that brought my daughter to this milestone. I remained seated, my expression calm, while Aunt Lorraine beside me squeezed my hand under the table. Across the room, I could see Jasmine in position, her hand near the control tablet that would execute our counterplan the moment Derek triggered his sabotage. Natasha has always been our dreamer, my father continued, and I recognized the setup he was building, the same pattern of false praise leading to devastating criticism. Even as a child, she had grand ideas about becoming a famous writer, changing the publishing world, making her mark on literature. Polite chuckles rippled through the crowd. Several of my parents' friends nodded knowingly, recognizing the narrative of an impractical dreamer who never grew up. Of course, reality has a way of tempering childhood fantasies, my father went on, his tone shifting to something that resembled concern but felt more like condescension. As parents, we tried to guide Natasha toward more practical aspirations. We encouraged her to find stable employment, to accept her limitations, to build a modest life rather than chasing impossible dreams. I watched Cameron Mitchell's face across the room. His expression had shifted from polite attention to barely concealed anger as he realized what kind of parents would speak about their daughter this way at her own birthday celebration. Tonight, we want to celebrate Natasha for who she really is, my mother interjected, standing beside my father with a smile that looked warm to anyone who didn't know her. Not for who she pretends to be, but for the reality of her life. Because honesty, we believe, is the greatest gift we can give our children. Derek stood then, moving toward the presentation screen with the confident stride of someone about to deliver a killing blow. As Natasha's brother, I've prepared a special tribute that I think really captures her journey. And Natasha herself wanted to share some words with all of you, thoughts she's been preparing about her life and career. My cue to stand came as the lights dimmed slightly, focusing attention on the large screen at the front of the room. I rose gracefully, feeling the emerald dress catch the light, and walked to the microphone with the poise of someone who had delivered countless presentations to rooms far more intimidating than this. Thank you, Derek, I said, my voice steady and clear. I did prepare some thoughts to share with everyone tonight. Thoughts about truth, family, and the courage it takes to be authentic in a world that often prefers comfortable lies to uncomfortable reality. I watched Derek's finger hover over the laptop touchpad, ready to trigger what he thought was his weapon. My father and mother stood together, barely able to contain their anticipation of my imminent humiliation. Barbara Stevenson had her pen poised over her notebook, ready to document the scandal my mother had promised. Please, I gestured toward the screen, let's begin. Derek clicked the file. For 3 seconds, the screen went black, exactly as Raymond had programmed. I saw confusion flicker across Derek's face, then satisfaction as he assumed the pause was part of my technical incompetence. Then white text appeared on the screen, bold and impossible to ignore. The truth about Natasha Reynolds. The font was elegant, professional, the kind used in high-end corporate presentations. Music swelled through the sound system, not loud or dramatic, but sophisticated and confident. The kind of score you'd hear in a documentary about successful entrepreneurs. Derek's face went white. My mother gasped audibly. My father's confident smile froze, then crumbled into confusion. The screen transitioned to the first testimonial, and Cameron Mitchell's face appeared in high-definition video. I'm Cameron Mitchell, his recorded voice filled the venue, and 3 years ago, I was struggling to find a publisher who understood my vision. Traditional houses wanted to change everything about my manuscript. Then I met Natasha Reynolds, founder and CEO of Constellation Digital Publishing. The murmurs rippling through the crowd shifted from confusion to shock as Cameron's testimonial continued. Several guests pulled out their phones, quickly searching his name to confirm what they were hearing. Cameron Mitchell wasn't just any author, he was a critically acclaimed novelist whose books had sold millions of copies worldwide. Natasha didn't just publish my work, Cameron's recorded voice continued as images of his best-selling books appeared on screen. She understood it. She built a platform that gave authors like me creative control while providing the professional support and distribution that traditional publishing offers. Because of her vision and business acumen, I've had 3 consecutive New York Times bestsellers. The screen transitioned to Helena Voss, whose memoir had become a cultural phenomenon last year. When I approached traditional publishers with my story, they wanted to sanitize it, make it palatable for mass audiences, Helena said, her image commanding the screen. Natasha Reynolds and Constellation Digital Publishing gave me the freedom to tell my truth while providing editing, marketing, and distribution that made my memoir reach readers worldwide. She's not just a publisher, she's a visionary who's transforming how stories get told. I watched my family's faces as the testimonials continued. Derek had backed away from the laptop as if it had burned him, his expression cycling through confusion, denial, and dawning horror. My mother's hand covered her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. My father stood frozen, his prepared speech notes crumpling in his trembling hands. The presentation shifted to financial data, displayed with the professional graphics Raymond had designed. Revenue charts showed Constellation Digital Publishing's growth trajectory, from modest beginnings 7 years ago to current annual revenues of $8.7 million. Market share analysis demonstrated how my platform had captured 12% of the independent publishing market in just 3 years. This can't be real, Derek finally managed to say, his voice barely audible over the presentation's audio. She's a struggling writer. She lives in a tiny apartment. She built an empire while you underestimated her. Aunt Lorraine's voice cut through the room like a blade. She stood, her presence commanding immediate attention. I've been an angel investor in Natasha's company since its founding. I've watched her create something remarkable while her own family dismissed every achievement as fantasy. The screen now showed partnership announcements, deals with major retailers, distribution agreements with international platforms, and finally, the Toronto expansion that would position my company as a major player in North American digital publishing. Then came the segment Raymond had designed specifically to counter Derek's sabotage. The screen split into 2 columns, what they planned to show you, and the truth. In the left column, images appeared of Derek accessing my laptop, screenshots of him modifying files, timestamped security footage of him uploading his sabotage presentation to the venue's system. Every action documented with the precision of a forensic investigation. My brother planned to humiliate me tonight, I said into the microphone, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. He created a fake speech designed to make me confess to failures and lies that never existed. What he didn't know is that everything he did was documented by professionals I hired specifically to protect myself from his conspiracy. The right column filled with evidence of my actual accomplishments, contracts signed with major authors, testimonials from literary agents who'd partnered with my platform, revenue statements verified by independent auditors, and media coverage from legitimate publishing industry journals. Barbara Stevenson was writing furiously in her notebook, but her expression had completely changed. She was no longer documenting a scandal about a fraudulent daughter. She was witnessing a story about family betrayal and a remarkable entrepreneur who'd been forced to defend herself against her own relatives. The story gets worse. Patricia stood, introducing herself as my attorney. Over the past 72 hours, we've documented a coordinated conspiracy involving Natasha's parents and brother. They planned not just tonight's public humiliation, but a campaign to destroy her professional reputation through false stories planted in media outlets. Patricia displayed emails between my mother and Barbara Stevenson, messages where my mother had promised exclusive evidence of fraud and documentation of deception that would make a sensational story for the social register. Every false claim was documented, time-stamped, and irrefutable. Mrs. Stevenson, Patricia addressed the reporter directly, "You've been used as an unwitting weapon in a family's attempt to destroy their daughter's reputation. I trust you'll write the actual story, about a successful entrepreneur who had to defend herself against her own family's cruelty." Barbara Stevenson nodded slowly, her professional instincts clearly recognizing that this was a far better story than the scandal my mother had promised. The presentation's final segment featured tomorrow's Riverside Business Journal profile, with the editor providing a pre-recorded statement confirming their upcoming feature on Constellation Digital Publishing and its innovative founder. The legitimacy of a respected business publication validated everything the audience had just witnessed. As the presentation concluded, the room erupted in applause, but not for my family. The 150 guests were standing, applauding me, their expressions ranging from admiration to shock to righteous anger on my behalf. Cameron Mitchell approached first, embracing me warmly. "I had no idea your own family was doing this to you. Natasha, everyone in this room needs to understand, you're not just a successful publisher. You're one of the most ethical, visionary entrepreneurs I've ever worked with." Other authors and publishing professionals clustered around me, offering support and sharing their own testimonials about working with my company. Meanwhile, my parents and Derek stood isolated near their table, social pariahs in a room full of people who now understood exactly what kind of people they were. Derek's legal colleagues were particularly brutal in their judgment. I overheard one senior partner telling him, "If you're willing to sabotage your own sister like this, what does that say about your ethical standards? We'll be discussing your future with the firm." My mother tried to approach me, tears streaming down her face, but Aunt Lorraine intercepted her. "You've done enough damage," my aunt said coldly. "Tonight, you attempted to destroy your daughter in front of 150 witnesses. Every person in this room now knows what kind of parents you are. Live with that." As the party continued, transformed from my planned humiliation into an impromptu celebration of my actual success, I noticed venue security escorting someone out. Kevin appeared at my elbow, explaining quietly. "Trevor Blackstone, the photographer your brother hired. He tried to leave with his memory cards, claiming he had exclusive documentation to sell. Jasmine's team confiscated all his equipment per venue policy. The only photos leaving here tonight are the ones we approve." The evening wound down with guests approaching me individually, many apologizing for ever doubting my capabilities, others offering business partnerships and opportunities. Several of my parents' friends made a point of distancing themselves from my family, their social standing crumbling in real time. As midnight approached and guests departed, I found myself on the venue's terrace with Jasmine, Patricia, Raymond, and Aunt Lorraine. The city lights sparkled below us, beautiful and infinite with possibility. "So what happens now?" Jasmine asked. "Now I stop hiding," I replied simply. "Tomorrow, the Business Journal profile runs. Next week, I announce the Toronto expansion publicly. And my family, they'll have to live with the consequences of their choices." Patricia handed me a folder. "Derek's law firm has already contacted me. They're conducting an ethics investigation. Your parents' country club has received complaints from members who witnessed tonight's events. And Barbara Stevenson's article will run in tomorrow's social register, but it's about a remarkable entrepreneur who overcame family betrayal, not the scandal your mother promised. There's one more thing," Aunt Lorraine said, pulling out her phone. "Your parents took out a second mortgage on their house 6 months ago. I did some investigating, they used the money to fund Derek's partnership buy-in at his firm. They're financially overextended, and after tonight's social destruction, your father's real estate business is going to suffer significantly. The karmic justice was almost poetic. They'd tried to destroy my financial reputation while hiding their own precarious situation. As I prepared to leave the venue, I took one last look at the empty space where my family had planned my humiliation. Instead, they'd given me the perfect stage for my emergence into the professional world I'd been hiding from. My phone buzzed with a message from Cameron. Just got off the phone with 3 other best-selling authors. We all want to move our backlists to Constellation. What your family tried to do to you made us realize how much integrity matters. We want to work with someone who has character, not just business skills. 30 years old, publicly successful, surrounded by people who actually valued me. This wasn't the birthday I'd planned, but it was the one I deserved. And my family? They'd learned the most expensive lesson of their lives. Never underestimate the person you've spent decades belittling. She might just be the most powerful person in the room. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.